So we're going to talk about communities and building them. And whereas it could be sometimes like a buzzword for many. So let's discuss why do we need this, why are we doing this, and oh, hi.
Yeah, let's talk about community. Do you want us to jump in while we're fixing your mic?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we all define community in different ways, right? And we're at a startup event, a tech event, so that's the angle that I think we're really going to take today and be able to help kind of explain, what's community look like for you, for us, what can it look like? Ultimately, Shayan, you might have a slightly different definition than me, but when we're talking about community building, I'm usually talking about a group of people who come together over a shared goal and support each other toward that goal. So this is like kind of a standard definition of community. And if you don't have each of those pieces, you probably don't actually have a community, you just have some kind of group of people. So that's the structure that I would use to kind of get in our heads of what we're talking about. And you can have communities like this for your brand, for an organization like a Women in Tech group that you might want to be starting. You can have this for fun, but obviously a lot of us here are going to be creating these because we have a product or service that someone might come back to a second time around or a third time around. And as soon as you have repeat customers or repeat people that you want to engage with whatever it is you're doing, you have a use case to need a community.
Righty, thanks, Margaux. So I will be taking this from the perspective of companies that don't have communities. To give you a bit of context, my company is called Propel. So what we are doing is we're championing a new business model called Community as a Service. How it works is across the world there are, like Margaux said, thousands of communities. Think of Riga Turk girls, for example, that are banded around specific interests, right? Or women who code, or different DevOps groups, Web3 groups, AI groups. So what we've done is we've built a platform where all these communities can come hang out, solve their last mile problems, giving their members access to jobs, access to financial services and the likes. So what we've done through that work is we've built the largest ecosystem of tech communities in the world, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we work with companies, right, to leverage these communities on demand to drive their own either products, people, or business goals. So what we have seen so far is there are separate models right now around how companies think about communities from a business standpoint, right? As a startup, how exactly do you think about communities? As a scale-up, how exactly do you think about and engage communities? When your priorities change, how do you do that? Of course, we'll jump into more context during the conversation, but I would think from an overview standpoint, I think the concept of communities is super important from a business standpoint because people tend to think it's this happy thing that doesn't have a lot of business outcomes. But if you think about it, if you are a PlayStation user, if you're a BlackBerry user, we were talking about this earlier, right? Each of these companies have built communities, and the fact that Google has communities as well, and then the fact that they're driving all these business outcomes is because they have these communities banded around them. But how do you abstract that to your startup? That's what we'll be talking about today. That's what I'll be talking about today anyways.
Thank you for bringing this up, actually. Because it's a very good point. How do you measure the impact of your communities?
Yeah, certainly. So for us at Toptal, I'll add that we're a community of tech professionals in over 140 countries around the world. Think like more than 15,000 is what I'm allowed to tell you, but it's a lot of people all over the world. So most of what we're doing is total online engagement. But you can apply some of these metrics that I'll mention to in-person as well. But ultimately, if you're running events, very easy, measure how many people are coming to your events. After every event, definitely send a survey out, ask an NPS question, which is a really popular metric, 0 to 10. Are you likely to recommend this event to a friend? And always add an open-ended question following that of why did you give this score? That way you can kind of get a little anecdotal evidence on if you're getting really bad ones or really good ones, kind of what you've done right or wrong. Events is kind of maybe a little more obvious one, but other things you might want to measure over time is membership growth. Just purely, are there more and more people wanting to join your community and be there? And then engagement is one of the hardest things to measure because you need the right tech tools and tech stack set up in the first place, but you want to engage how many of your members are actually participating in some kind of meaningful way. So after you run an event, whether it's virtual or in person, do people go back into your Slack community, Facebook group, whatever, post messages? Do they try and reach each other one-on-one? You can also look at engagement, like, are people answering each other's questions in your chat platform? You know you have a thriving community when people are already answering things and you and your support team don't have to go in and answer for them. If that's happening, like, let it happen, support it, give them a gold star, emoji, because that kind of engagement is really what you want to see. And then, of course, you want to look at how that's changing and trending over time. Are there spikes when you run certain initiatives or promote in certain ways or run different, activations? So those are some like basic metrics you can look at when you're getting started, and we can, get more complicated in a Q&A this afternoon if anyone wants to, dig deeper into that. What would you add for metrics?
For startups, I think I would start with really defining what success means to you, right? The important thing is, especially for startups, most startups don't have the capacity or the time, right, or the resources to build their own communities. So the first thing is, if you are in the early stage of your startup, for example, your priority might be pushing out your first product. So how exactly do you work with communities to drive those goals? For you, it might be market research. You're building a product for developers, right? You want to find these developer groups, and you want to engage with them, and you want to deploy questionnaires and understand what exactly what their preferences are. But how we also think about it is, as you're starting that initial engagement with these communities, think about how you can drive them deeper into your funnel. Because you think about communities as groups of people, and when you want to actually engage people and drive outcomes, you need to figure out how to inspire people on an individual basis. One of the things we try to ask the startups we work with is, if you're in a room with 1,000 people and you want to talk about your product and you want 900 of them to actually sign up to your product to drive an outcome you want, what would you do? If you're with them for 10 seconds, what would you say? If you're with them for 1 minute, what would you say? And that makes startups start thinking about, how can we engineer our messaging to drive the outcomes we want? So your first quarter might be about pushing product. The second quarter, maybe you've launched your product, you want to find product testers as well. So connecting startups with product testing communities, we do a bit of that as well. Maybe the third quarter, you've built your product, you've tested it, you want to start hiring people, and then you want to start scaling up from there. So I'll go back to really defining what your priorities are, because the thing about communities is, you need to figure out if it's going to be sustainable and scalable. You need to figure out how it aligns with your business goals. And at every point in time, you need to be able to self-correct and readjust the goals of a community. And if you have people that believe in what you do fundamentally, then as your journey changes, even if you change your business model or something changes in your general direction, you still have these people that you can repurpose to your goals as you grow as a company.
That's good points here. Actually, as you mentioned, when you have you're validating your product, maybe you have these 900 developers in your community. How can you improve your product by taking this input from your community? And also, as you mentioned, how do you ask these right questions? And how do you get the right feedback? Yes, we can do these NPS scores and so on, but how do you get that right?
Yeah, sure. So absolutely, as a startup or any kind of business, it doesn't matter what phase you're at, you should leverage your community for the things that you need them for, because it should be a cyclical relationship. Like, to have a strong community, you should be giving them something, joy through all of these things that you're creating, a sense of engagement and belonging. But in return, they're contributing back to you, and that's how a community works. So it's, first of all, like, it's okay to ask for that kind of stuff in return. And the really cool thing with something like product or beta testing is that your community wants to do that with you as well. So you have a really huge opportunity here to come to your community, say, in a really kind of sexy way, you can say to them, hey, you're our special insider community. You've been with us from the start. We've seen your excitement in our Facebook group or wherever you engage with them, an email list. And therefore, we're going to give you special early access to our new, upgrade, to our new, product adjustment. And then you're asking for their feedback in return, but it's in an exciting way where they feel like they're getting access to something before everybody else. And we can all picture examples of this, right? Someone's releasing a new, sneaker, a new tech integration on their product, whatever it is. If you get it before everybody else and you're that early adopter, it's really exciting. And if you go a second step further and your feedback actually gets implemented and changes the outcome of where that product or service is going, you really want to keep engaged with that product now. Like, you're going to build lifetime supporters and community members because they're going to be so excited to have been a part of that journey. And that's such an amazing piece of having a strong community, because they're going to be really honest with you in return. And so it's kind of a relationship where everybody wins. But, you know, before you can get there, you have to foster a sense of community. And so we can kind of keep talking about some of those tactics. But product feedback is absolutely a relevant way to leverage your community.
I think it's important to think about what motivates people individually and as a collective. And why I say so is when we work with companies or startups, we say when you want to work with communities, you need to think about, maybe categorize your users, for example. There are people that are inspired by stories and your roadmap and your product features. There are people that are inspired by access to your, insider access. There are people that are inspired by resources or merch or free stuff. So what we say is, if you have like these 3 different categories, then you have the opportunity to actually convert more people. Because I think about community engagement like a marketing campaign. You need to figure out when you want to do a giveaway. You need to figure out when you want to do a regular marketing campaign. And if you do that, you can now align with everybody's individual priorities. So what we tell customers is, imagine you had 0 budget. How would you get people to really be passionate about what you do? We have companies saying, I'm trying to find PR, groups of PR specialists, for example, or groups of DevOps specialists, or I have a blockchain I've built, or I'm working on a blockchain project. I want to get people within Web3 communities to build dApps for my blockchain, right? The question is, why would they care about your blockchain or your crypto project when there's like thousands out there? These are the things that you have to start drilling down into. And if you think about it, community building is super, super important, because we are inundated with so much information from everybody. Everyone is trying to market to you. So that part of, figuring out, if I was the one as well, so my background is I used to be in marketing. I started a marketing company early on in my career. And what we realized is when we pitch for particular projects, right, with companies, I did a pitch for Guinness, for example, a couple of years ago. We lost the account, or we didn't get the account. But since that day till now, I still really care about Guinness as a brand, and I see a lot of things they do, and I'm very specific about it. So there's that access, or being able to get people to actually deep dive into your product or your brand would really help them understand you and maybe align with what you're doing as you're building.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, because what you're talking about is creating a sense of belonging where they want to be part of that brand, not as a transactional relationship, but because they truly believe in it. And like that definition we gave at the beginning, they're striving toward the same goal that you are with that business. And that could be as simple as having a great moment of relaxation over a beer with your friends, like if that's the product, right? But if we all have that shared vision of why we're participating and why we want to be part of that group, it's like we're way ahead of not having leveraged that and thought about that in a concerted way.
Sure. Makes sense.
So this is fascinating for me. A question for you both. As you have been working on different businesses and brands and projects on this community building, do you have a channel that's your favorite and that kind of always works? Or is it sometimes or always different?
What do you mean by channel?
I mean, where you engage with your community. So is it like Slack? Is it Facebook group?
Yeah, we use Slack. So we have a Slack with, again, more than 15,000 people in it, quite a bit more. And so it is robust. You definitely have to learn how to use whatever tool you're using to the best of your advantage, and have kind of a system of letting people know where to go in there if you have such a big group. If you are small and starting out, though, there's lots of opportunities for what to use for sure. You'd be amazed at the capabilities of Facebook groups these days if you haven't tried to use one. I feel like it's funny because I haven't run my own, but I am a part of a few that are very effective, and it's one simple tool that everyone still has an account. It kind of amazes you. But yeah, I'm part of some on Discord and other platforms, but often I find, especially in the startup community, everyone already has a Slack account. They're all kind of used to using it. And so for us, that's been a really great one to leverage. And these days, there's obviously a lot of conversation before us on stage and around here about AI and different tools, and platforms like that are absolutely starting to integrate all of that stuff in meaningful ways that cut down on a community team's workload, because they're adding things like ways to distill a channel into a couple bullet points. So if you were on holidays for a week and you missed a bunch of chatter in this channel, you could click a button to do a weekly recap, and it gives you kind of a couple bullets of what you missed in that channel that you really like typically engaging in. So we're going to start to see more of that, which will make it even easier for community teams and less burden, especially if you have a small group that's kind of just starting to think about this for your membership.
Because we work with communities in different regions, locations, and everything, we find that it's a mixed bag, right? We have communities that exist solely on Slack, on Telegram, on WhatsApp, on Discord. So what we've done is we built integrations in our products that actually can amplify or send messages to all these different platforms. So if you're a brand, you wanted to launch a campaign, for example, to talk about your product to a DevOps community, we could have 10 different DevOps communities in 10 or 3 different, that have 3 different groups that they are on. You send your messaging through our platform, and it goes to all these people where they are, right? And that's important because you realize, especially because if you're trying to drive certain outcomes, some people are more likely to respond on WhatsApp, for example, right? Some countries, it's WhatsApp on a day-to-day basis that they use. So I feel like, of course, it means that you have to kind of change your messaging. If you're sending via email, you have the privilege of space. If you have WhatsApp, you have to be brief, things like that. Sometimes you shouldn't do everything because a lot of times if you try to hit too many platforms, you could just dilute your message. But I also believe right now, because we're existing in so many different directions, it's important to figure out where best can you get direction, but also what lends itself to your product experience. If you have a fully mobile product experience, you shouldn't be spending too much investments, for example, in a Slack group. You should be spending a lot of investment in your WhatsApp channels or your Telegram channels, because from there you could put links and direct people straight into your app or whatever. So it always depends on your outcomes or the outcomes you're trying to drive, and then you just take it down from there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Really, the bottom line of what we're both saying is think first about where your community already exists, lean into that, and really just pick one. Really just lean into one. Especially we know if you're a startup or scaling, you are super busy already. So bottom line, first try and do some research and figure out where they already live, and then just lean into that one platform.
Yeah, nice stuff. So as I know you both are on team remote work. The question is there's a lot of still it's going on. Some are saying no, we need to all go back to the office, so we don't need to go that. But community building, usually you're not where these people are. So fundamentally, within your teams, aside from building communities for your company, how do you engage with your day-to-day work life? I think, Sean, your team is all remote, so is yours. So are there any challenges that you're seeing because you don't see each other every day, and how do you tackle them?
Our company started during the pandemic or just before the pandemic, so we had no choice but to be remote. Every problem we faced it being remote, so we've been able to optimize around fixing our problems while being fully remote. We've seen a few things. People say, why you should get people to the office is because you can really measure their effectiveness and efficiency, and that's also correct. But what we see is you have to set up frameworks that work even in a remote environment. So for example, last year we're 30 people for context, right? Last year we had a Scrum Master / growth lead, and he's the one person that's the most annoying person in the company, right? Because what happens is when you're given a task, it's very easy to have tasks slip through in a very fast-moving environment. So his responsibility is to make sure that everybody's tasks are being done and being followed up, and all the cross-team dependencies are being executed at the time and at the pace they're supposed to be doing. So that was a physical element in the digital system. Right, but apart from that, because you have these systems that are very digital, it's very difficult to have that personal touch. So what we've done is introduce a couple of initiatives, right, to just help people feel a bit together apart from just work. We have our daily stand-up channels, of course, but we also recently launched a music channel on our Slack. So every week, somebody's a resident DJ, and then they talk about what they're listening to that week, right? And these things, even though they're very, they're not business focused, but they do help drive people towards a much more cohesive environment, and I feel like that should only be the beginning. Of course, it's going to depend on your company, how exactly things work within your organization. But I think being able to drill deep down to what do people care about, what's the age demography of my organization, what outcomes are we trying to drive, and then now figuring out what initiatives can I launch in that direction would help create a very good social environment in a digital workspace.
Yeah, we do some of those same things as you in our Slack channels. We have spaces where people can interact just purely for fun. And I think like one concept of community building that's basically if you're doing study on what is community building, what are the principles of building a great community, one of the ones we talk about a lot is permission to participate, and that you have to give it very clearly. So whether that's your remote team or your community, it still applies. So permission to participate would mean something like, you open a fun Slack channel. Let's use your example. You have a music channel and you're allowed to post anything to do with music in there, you know, what you're listening to, what concert you went to, what tech show was playing on stage, whatever, okay? If you don't tell people that they're explicitly allowed to post in there and they're new to your company or new to your community and they just see this channel called music, they might be really tentative and nervous on being able to write in there. That sounds maybe a bit silly, but there's a lot of research to show that you need to give clear participation. So in this channel every week, there should be something like a workflow that pops up or a clear description, or you tell someone when they're new to the team, we want you to post in the music channel. We find this a way for our team to connect because we're all over the world and we're not together, and we love to hear about music from your country. It doesn't have to be popular, it can be niche, it can be anything you want. We want you to post. In fact, in your first 2 weeks of work, I'd like to see you post in there about some kind of music-related topic. So you're giving like explicit permission for that person to participate, and you can apply that sentiment to anything. Like it can be a technical, a business channel, whatever. It has to be explicit like that for them to really, truly feel comfortable, even though that might sound silly. I promise you it's necessary. It'd be the same example of if in person, I walked into an empty room where I was supposed to meet people, and I go in and it's empty, I'm probably just gonna turn around and leave and never come back. The same applies to a Slack channel. If I go in and there's no clarity on posts, someone wrote a business question recently in the music channel, so I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem like the spot I was meant to be. I'm gonna leave that Slack channel and probably not participate in the way you wanted me to and probably not come back. And that's where like in community building, we also talk about setting boundaries and rules and like being the ones to enforce them. We could go into a whole other conversation about that, but applying that to this example too, if someone on your team does post something in that channel that says like, hey, I have a question about this business thing, us as the leaders of those communities have to actually go in and say, you know, hey, Spencer, I really appreciate that you're asking this question, but it actually belongs in this other channel. This channel's about music, and I love that you're participating and asking those like smart questions. Why don't you, in the meantime, like go post over here, but in the meantime, tell us what you listened to this week. So you're keeping it positive, but you're really enforcing like the rules of that channel so the fun can stay fun in the fun music channel, and the work can happen where the work should be happening. And so this is just one example, but one thing I can give you as a really good tip too is if you are starting to work with a remote team or a remote community and you're kind of like to the base of your question, like what are some hurdles, how can you deal with them? Toptal has been fully remote since the day it started. We have staff in over 100 countries, we have no offices, and we never will. So over 12 years, we have over 1,500 internal staff in the company. So that's not the community I run, but that's like our team that runs the company. And again, in many, many countries. And they created, in the pandemic, when everything started happening, a suddenly remote playbook. So if you type in Toptal remote playbook, you will get a ton of amazing resources, perfectly like categorized on things to do with running a remote team in various regions, and it is fabulous. So I can skip a bunch of those great tips because you can find them in the remote playbook by Toptal.
Amazing. Everyone should download it now. Thank you. But speaking about communities, as let's say early stage startups, they only have a limited amount of time and resources. So is it essential for every company to build a community, or is it product specific? What do you think? Do we need it from day one, or do we need it from day X? When? Why?
Look, communities are people, and you need people. People are going to buy your products, people are going to use your product, people are going to refer your product. From day one, you need to be thinking about and embedding community into the very fabric of your organization. And this is because as you grow and as you figure out how things change, you're going to need people that are not part of your staff to drive outcomes that you might not be able to pay for. And that's like music to any startup's ears, right? So for startups right now, especially like I said earlier, because it's such a convoluted space being a startup right now, I think being able to have this community speak and thinking about it, number one, would help you start engaging with people, but also it would help you start understanding the frameworks you can deploy in terms of how you scale your community. Now, communities don't have to be, 1,000 people. What we tell in a couple of startups is, if you want to get one person, what would the person be? So if it's a one person, for example, you want one person you want to hire one person into your company, you need 10 product testers to test your product, you need 100 people to go refer other people to your product, you need 1,000 people to use your product, and then the list goes on and on and on like that. So if you have that category of saying at every stage of my company, this is the ideal number of people I need to have in my community, all you have to do is work on that particular number, and as your team grows and as your company grows and as your aspirations grow, you can scale up as necessary. And that's why we saw that importance of community as a service, because communities or companies might not have the time or resources or energy to maintain those communities, right? So what happens is on-demand communities or on-demand people for when you need them and for when you don't, right? So for this to give an example again, for example, we have companies saying, you know what, so we have massive clients saying, we're actually having a problem with pipeline. We have our tech roles, right? But we have too little female applicants in our tech roles. Can you help us get our jobs into the dashboards of all the female-focused communities on your platform? That way they can increase their pipeline to actually hire more women into their tech roles. Now, that's a very strong business outcome for them, right? So if you think about it in terms of business outcomes, then you think about the fact of investing in that particular type of thing, right? And I made some examples earlier on doing product testing, for example. You've launched a fintech product, you want to find a cybersecurity community for them to do some penetration testing or penetrative testing on your products, right? These are things that you might need groups of people for, and as you grow and as your aspirations change, you can just switch things up. So I think that community speak would help you have that good grounding when you start, and as you know, and as you grow as well, it's just going to be natural, and more people would have heard about you, more people will be interested in what you're talking about, but also you have this place where people also pull in other people. This is a fantastic company to work with, or this is a fantastic product to use, for example. And if you think about it again, that every single product we use, where we actively promote it, even though we're not a community per se of that product. For example, TikTok, you talk about it to your friends and the likes. So that social element would always be important. And if you engineer it in your startup from the get-go, you have good outcomes coming to you.
I totally agree with a lot of what you're saying as far as starting things really early, integrating it. I think a lot of times the pushback that we'll get when having these conversations with founders or small business owners is that they're just so fearful of the fact that they don't have enough time and they can't do it well really early. But I was lucky to be at now somewhere like Toptal where they have integrated community from the very beginning, and it's gone like in waves over time in how much they've invested in it and how many people, but it's been there as something they cared about from the very start, and we do have this huge community now. And I think that what we have to think about is like some, you guys work on it too, some basic marketing tactics that you can use here that may not feel like community, but they're building it kind of slowly and subtly. So an example would be, right away, is there anything that someone downloads on your website to find out more information about you? Or is there anything where when they buy your product, you're gathering their contact info? It's like, awesome, okay. Keep all those contacts in a very clear spot, and you already have the start to a community. Because now as soon as you are ready to open that Slack channel, open that Discord group, whatever it is, Telegram, you can put all those people in there with a meaningful, kind of respectful answer in mind as far as how you're solving something for them. Like, hey, you all bought from us in the last 6 months. We want to bring you all together for XYZ, a feedback session, a beta test, or a new free thing that we're giving you because you were early adopters. It's going to get them excited. It's going to get that word of mouth going. That's all community building, even though it feels really like marketing tactics early on. Sometimes the community department lives within the marketing department. In a case like mine, we live in actually operations, because we're operationally making sure that these people are engaged and retained within our company. We're not external anymore at this point with community. So it can look like a lot of different things. A support community is a super common one. So think about even early, like you're gonna have to support people using your product and figuring it out, right? There's gonna be bugs, there's gonna be things that you need from them. Could you, instead of just having a secret private email space where people send you their concerns and you fix them, could you make a little platform, a forum maybe, where people can upvote product changes or ask questions, even in a very simple but public facing way? It doesn't have to be public, could be slightly behind a barrier, but people using your product, if I have a question because it's new and there's some kind of bug, probably 10 other people that are our clients have that same question, but I bet you one of those 10 has found some kind of very intelligent workaround, and they could tell the other 9 without you even having to be involved. So as much as it feels like work to set up a community early, it's actually going to save you time and save you work, because your community will start to respond to each other. And if that guy found an amazing fix, it's like you may not even know that with your team yet because you're busy working about the next product edit that you're working on, right? So really tons of advantages that you can start to see. And you mentioned it well too, word of mouth. Look at your data on how much you're getting new business from word of mouth, especially when you're new. If you have ambassadors in your community that you are lifting up, they are going to be word of mouth champions for you, which translates directly into sales. So when we talk about metrics, there's some ROI you can see there too. Follow a few people. Lift up a few community members, give them some kind of special access, and then watch them. See if referrals are coming from those people. Give them a referral code. Like, all of that is part of building your community. So lots of opportunities as far as why you should start early in your journey with that.
So something to add maybe is, I know it does seem like work, but nowadays we have tools that you can actually build automations on. So for example, everyone has that one friend that reaches out to you out of the blues only when they need something, right? Then you have to answer them or not answer them. And then you have your friend that you talk to every day. And if they come to you with a request, you're more likely to answer the person. So how you think about it is, if someone joins your community from day one, how do you engage with them? Enough or long enough that they become an ambassador or they become comfortable with your brand, right? You can't do the same thing for everybody every single day because people join a community on different days. So you could actually build automations, right? You join on day one, your first message is this particular thing. On the 10th day that this person joins, they get another type of message, and then the likes. So when somebody new joins your funnel, they keep going through that storytelling journey that is personalized to them, right? But you don't have to, spend your time doing that, outreaching to them and talking to them every single point in time. And if you have 10,000 people join the community, you can actually have that personal touch with 10,000 people as well. So feel free to explore and research automation tools that can actually make that journey personal but scalable as well.
Yeah, we absolutely use workflows when people are joining our community to let them know about how to engage, where they can find the people they might want to find. And then that's a great point that you just made as far as if you're just only taking emails and sending something to them when you have something to sell, yeah, you're not going to get that engagement, and you're going to, you'll still have little spikes in sales, but it's not going to be the same like ambassadorship that you'll see as if you're sending them notifications when there's new product features, when there's new colors available, when there's new, exciting things that you're doing. You're in the news. You've had some exciting thing to tell them about. It really feels like at that early stage a lot like marketing tactics, but you're thinking of it from the sense of just what would these people want to understand and know about from us, and not just what can we sell them.
Let's look at maybe on the darker side. What if you're like, yes, I'm building up a community, I'm empowering people, they're going to love my product. What are some risks? What if something goes wrong and something toxic happens? You accidentally build a toxic community. What do you do? How do you fix that? And how do you make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place?
Foundationally, it's important to understand your principles. Right, and communities can become toxic very quickly. And if you have a foundational understanding of what exactly your brand stands for, you can figure out what can pass or what cannot pass, right? And like Margaux said earlier, you have to sometimes be willing to put your foot on the ground, right, when things go awry or when things go not the way you want. I would say with people as well, people are open to their opinions, and then conversations happen even in your space and without your space, right? But sometimes, a lot of times, you have to say, this is what my brand stands for. So for example, we know that if you're checking Apple videos on YouTube, they have no comments at all. And we're used to it. It's weird, right? But they don't want to see comments. They are one of the biggest brands in the world. They don't have comments. Samsung, for example, has comments. So everybody has their own thing, and then they go much deeper into it. Sometimes things change, and then they have to switch things up. Like Apple recently launched their developer channel. Now it has comments in the YouTube videos. So it depends on where you are per time and what you're optimizing for. And we've not had very specific examples of communities going crazy. Basically, maybe Margaux can speak on that or give a bit more insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you that we need a very clear set of values from the get-go to understand and know exactly where you're going with your community and what you stand for and not. We even need this as human beings, personally, when we're thinking about our brand even. a good example is if you're someone who wants your brand to be really, by the book, well-behaved, like certain things you don't do, then someone approaches you with some really cool big opportunity to speak on a stage at a conference all about smoking cigarettes. And if your brand is like, I really don't believe in that, I'm very clean, my brand is very clean, nature, like natural stuff, it's like, are you going to take that really exciting opportunity on that really big stage? Or are you in fact not going to do it because it's against your brand? Really, that's a very quick no in this example. Because in this example, very quickly, it doesn't match your brand. Your community should have the same kind of values that are so clear so that if there's certain behavior, you can enforce your rules very quickly, right? And so, we have had situations where we've absolutely had to deal with tough situations and enforce rules. The first thing, have a clear code of conduct from the start. So as soon as you open some kind of group space that people can be in, call it a Slack community or whatever it is, you need to have a clear code of conduct that's like pinned at the top. They get it when they come in. So already people know what they're allowed, like what you're going to enforce or what they're allowed to adhere to or not. And then as community builders, what we were talking about before, that idea of setting boundaries and rules and being the ones to enforce it, it can be really hard because community builders are often people who want everyone to come together and have this great sense of belonging and connection. But in order to allow people to feel a sense of belonging, which means a certain amount of trust and safety that they feel, right? You have to also get those other people kind of out of the way who are breaking that. And that can be hard because you're the one now having to be an enforcer, which doesn't always feel fun. But that example before of just like redirecting people that I gave is a first place to start. Say, hey, this is not the content we have here. Go over here or go to our private help center. We don't put that kind of content in here. Even like solicitation we find happens often. So it's not like a dramatic example of what you're talking about where things blow up, in which case you might need to go with a serious PR strategy. But if someone's like doing solicitation, so they're posting, their own personal business and sales in a bunch of your channels. Okay, you don't want that, obviously. That's not community building. That's someone just spamming. We delete messages. We go to that person and we say, we're not here to stifle you, but this is a community that stands for all of these things. It's all over our website. We were clear in our code of conduct. Like, this is what we do. What you posted, it really doesn't do that. It really kind of takes away from that. So we've taken it down, but we still really encourage you to post. It's just like, here's, take a look again at what we post about here and what those channels are about. And so we try and keep it really positive in that first interaction. And I will tell you that more often than not, people come back to you and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize I couldn't do that here. I was just excited about my new project. I won't do it again. And then you can watch them, and after a few weeks, they get comfortable, they start posting again. So we, obviously, as community builders, we want to keep it positive, but you still have to enforce those rules, because otherwise, if you start getting someone spamming everywhere, and that guy gets away with it, the next guy gets away with it, and not only that, but the people who want to post about really intelligent topics, the ones who want to be there to talk about your product or your community kind of aspects, they're going to stop posting because they don't want to be part of that. They don't feel a sense of belonging anymore. They feel discomfort by what you've allowed to happen. So it's important, enforcing it.
Yeah, it's kind of like parenting. If you allow bad behavior to happen once, then everyone's going to start doing it, and then your community that you've built is going to leave because they don't feel safe anymore.
Yeah, people don't want to be around that person causing them trouble, so they'll leave. Much like the example of going into an empty room. If you're going to a room with people who are not what you expected when you're in there, you're also going to leave it and not come back. So you're losing the good ones. That's a big risk. So you may as well be a little pushy and a little enforcing to get rid of the ones that don't match your community.
I think it's maybe a good point to end on, that community building, it's not a buzzword. It can be a big risk if you get it wrong, but it can really build your company if you get it right and you engage with the right room, with the right amount of people.
Sure. I think maybe signing out, it's important as a company, as a startup, to understand what your DNA is. And your DNA is going to a very large extent, determine how you build or engage or create or accelerate your community. If you are a cybersecurity startup, you might be a bit more conservative. If you're a sneaker startup, you might be a bit more out there. If you're doing posters or paintings, you might be a bit more creative. If you're doing AI, you might be a bit more targeted on intelligence and putting out thought leadership. So I think being able to be very self-aware, right, is the first step in figuring out how exactly can I create a community that is, number one, very genuine, right? Because if there's no genuinity, it kind of shows. And if you're struggling, people are going to know. So once you just have that internal, compass, Then you can figure out how to navigate it. Then you move towards the next steps of, like you said, setting up a code of conduct, getting people in, making sure you have early believers, scaling your team. And if that DNA stays, as you scale, it's going to be much easier for that DNA to scale as well, because when communities scale, there's the risk of actually losing that core. But if that core is always in front of you, then it's going to be less likely for it to be diluted as much as it would have if it wasn't.
Yeah, Sean, this is so important. There are so many founders that have come to me before and said, I asked them this question of what exactly are you looking for? Who exactly are you looking for? What are your values? And they said to me, well, it's everyone. It's anyone who works out. I'm like, no, it is not. I will tell you it is not. And so I know some of you are thinking, but it is. And it's like, no, come talk to us later. But luckily, actually, Cheyenne and I are going to be doing a Q&A on the huddle stage at 2:50. So if you are sitting here thinking, I wish I could have asked them this or they didn't cover this, come and ask us the tough questions and we'll hopefully do our best to give you some insights in just a little while.
Yeah, let's go. Thank you both. It's been a journey.